The Witness the World podcast represents the personal views of the host and guests at the time of recording. These views may change over time. The content here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Any content here should not be construed as financial, medical, or any other type of professional advice. Please consult with a qualified practitioner should you require any professional advice. Good day, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the Witness the World podcast. My name is Ben Choi, and today we'll be speaking with someone from the eastern part of Canada. Our guest is a public speaking coach and a fellow YouTuber. His YouTube channel is called Master Talk, and he provides many tips and lessons on how to improve all aspects of public speaking. Today, we'll learn about his journey, and we'll also pick his brain on how we all can raise our public speaking game. Brenden Kumarasamy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Ben, the pleasure's absolutely mine. Thanks for having me.
Honor is ours. So Brenden, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there, when they think of public speaking, it probably frightens them, scares them. Maybe they had bad experiences in the past, and maybe even still having challenges with it today. I can tell you for a fact that was me growing up, high school, and also my university years doing presentations. I just couldn't wait for the clock to run out, so to speak. So to kick us off, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, how was public speaking for you growing up? Were you always the extroverted kid, no problem speaking in public in big groups? Or maybe there was, a growth kind of phase for you before you kind of became a really confident public speaker that you are today?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. I mean, the road was very similar to yours, actually. I had three main challenges growing up as a kid with speaking. The first one is I had to present my whole life in a language I didn't know. So for those who don't know, I grew up in a city called Montreal, which is a city you need to know to speak French in, which I did not know the language. But I had to study in French to be successful. So my whole life, every time I walked up on my French classes in my stages, my classrooms, I was presenting a language that I didn't really know. I struggled a lot because the French was my second language. That's one. The second one is I have a crooked left arm because of a surgery I had when I was younger. So when I had a cast on and I was talking to new people, it was really hard to make friends. No one really wants to talk to the guy who doesn't speak their language and has a broken cast. So that's two. And the third thing is you would think that a communication expert has like a bachelor's or a master's degree, even a PhD in communication. Yeah, I got a bachelor's degree in accounting, which is like not at all what I'm doing today. So what's the point of this, Ben? The point is if I could be a great communicator, I'm pretty sure everyone else can too.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that little journey there. So, hey, if you can do it, everybody can. So that's a great inspirational kind of thing to look forward to. So, growing up, I'm pretty sure, being a YouTuber wasn't the plan, that you had. And just curious, what were your dreams growing up prior to, becoming what you are today?
It's funny when you're 12 years old, Ben, and you write down in your yearbook what you want to be when you grow up. People answer astronaut or actor or comedian. Yeah, I answered accountant and never really changed my mind. Sure, I had a small stint when I was 11 where I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. But honestly, what I wanted to do was to be an accountant because I realized that I was really good at math, even if I didn't really know what an accountant did. And I said, that's my ticket out of poverty. That's my ticket out of making good money so that my parents don't really have to suffer as much as they did growing up, raising me and my sister. So that's what I did, man. I was really focused on getting a job in accounting, and then my life changed later in life where I changed course.
Thanks for sharing that. So, just kind of curious, when did you find out that you had this passion, this spark for public speaking? Was it, you went to some kind of, presentation, you talked to somebody, influential, or, yeah, just when did that kind of hit you that, you know what, you want to try this, maybe go in this direction and then see what it's all about?
Absolutely, Ben. So it happened in college. So when I started business school, I put my little $100 suit on from Sears, that's a bankrupt company now, and that's all we could afford. And it was oversized and I had a big tie. And I would go to these networking cocktails when I was 19. And I would meet students who were older than me who had jobs in places that I wanted to work at. KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst& Young, Deloitte, these are the dream companies. If I can get into one of them, I am set. So I went up to them and I said, "How do I get a job there?" And they answered something that I didn't really understand at the time. They said two words: case competitions. And I was like, "What's a case competition?" And that's when I realized that a case competition is like professional sports for nerds. So other guys my age were playing football or baseball, Ben. I was actually doing presentations competitively, but I didn't do it because I had a passion for communication. I did it because I knew I could get a job in accounting or at IBM where I landed after college that these competitions would open the door for. So I started doing these competitions. I got really good at them. And then I started coaching the kiddos, the students, on how to speak because we didn't really have an alternative. It was me or nobody. So I just started helping them, and I accidentally got really good at coaching. And that's what led to the YouTube channel Mass Talk and later the business.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So, I think when you kind of look at your LinkedIn profile, you go from, going for that kind of stable-ish kind of corporate job and then going to business for self. Yeah, a lot of people find that like pretty scary, and yeah, it's quite the shift there. So maybe you can just walk us through your thought process before you did the shift, and then finally taking the plunge. What was that like?
Absolutely, Ben. I had very little intention of being an entrepreneur. That was never the goal. So it all happened by accident, frankly. And I didn't take a lot of risk when I quit, too. That's why I became successful as an entrepreneur. So what happened was I started the YouTube channel in January 2019. So it wasn't that long ago. It was like probably almost 4 years ago at this point, and my business has grown significantly since then. And then what happened was 9 months into Master Talk, I was still at IBM. I was working as a very successful technology consultant there. So I wasn't really like thinking about, oh, I could turn this Master Talk thing into a massive business. I was just making videos in my mom's basement every week. But then in September, what happened is I went to Columbus, Ohio for an event called Summit of Greatness, which is hosted by Lewis Howes, who's the host of the School of Greatness podcast. So I went to this guy's event in the middle of nowhere. I go to one of his 5 a.m. workouts, which I don't do. I just did that to meet people. And I met my business partner there, Vamsi. And he's like double my age. And he looked at me and he said, "So, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I make YouTube videos." And he just started laughing at me, like on what? Pranks? Rapping? And I looked at him and I said, "No, executive communication." And then he looked at me and he said, "Huh, executive communication? Who makes YouTube videos on that?" So he took a liking to me, Ben. He just started watching a lot of my videos and he just bet on me. He said, "I think you could build a coaching business." And he just started coaching me for free. And then I was able to structure a business behind that. I started getting a ton of clients from my YouTube channel and my social media followings. And then I quit. But the advice that I want to share, Ben, and I'll throw it back to you, is my advice is always side hustle comfortably. A lot of people think they need canned beans and jump up and down and room with five other people. For me, I'm always a big fan of getting a really high paying job. Because when you have that, it gives you the freedom to actually think about your business. And I never quit my six-figure job until I did three things. One, until I had a 6 to 9 month emergency saving, which I did. Two, that I was already making money. I'd already replaced 30% of my income while I was working at IBM. So I knew I could do it. And the third thing that I did is I had a clear 90-day plan on replacing the rest of my income, which I did in like 60 days. But that's the point I want to drive, is that I took very little risk to be an entrepreneur.
Wow, yeah, this is such a great story, and yeah, thanks for the advice there. So I think there'd be probably a few people that'd be interested in kind of trying that plan. So I wanted to ask you about what you said in another podcast. You mentioned that there was like a secret sauce to your success, and that's like asking one hard question a day. And just curious, how did you find that approach? And yeah, maybe you can share about maybe the one hard question you ask yourself today.
Yeah, for sure, Ben. Love that you did the homework. So absolutely, right. Tony Robbins says it best. He says the quality of your life is solely determined by the quality of the questions that you ask yourself. My version of this, which is a bit more aggressive, is I dare everyone listening to this podcast to ask themselves a hard question about life every day for 30 days. Because if you did that, you would never be the same ever again. So if I think back to everything that's made me successful, Ben, there's a lot of things, but a lot of those aspects cannot be duplicated. Some of it's just my talent and communication. We can't really teach that. But I would say if there's one thing that I've done that's consistent across the board that any human being can implement is what I call 80-20 questions. So we already know about the 80-20 principle, which is what are the 20% of the actions that lead to 80% of one's results in life? My version of that, Ben, that I'm still working on, still work in progress, is what are the 20% of the questions that can lead to 80% of one's clarity in life? Because all of us should be doing different things in life. In the same way I shouldn't be a basketball player in the NBA, somebody else probably shouldn't be a communication coach. And our role as human beings is to be as self-aware as possible, to use questions to help us understand who we are, to then focus and make the right decision. So for me, being a baseball player is just the wrong decision, unless I do it casually. But if I try to do it professionally, it doesn't make any sense, because that's not what I'm called to do. So here's a couple of questions that people can think about. I'll give three so we don't overwhelm people with too much, hard questions. So one is, if I gave you all the money in the world, how would you spend your time? Like if I forced you to retire today, not at 65, which is a number that the government just put in our head, by the way. We didn't come up with that. Somebody else did. So if I retired you right now, Ben, what would you do with the rest of your life, time wise? And a lot of people don't have a good answer to that question. That's one. The second question that I'd encourage you to all think about is the focus question. If you could only accomplish three things in your life and only three things, what would you want to accomplish and why? And that helps you really focus on what actually matters because we're all going to be dead in 100 years anyways. Right? So that's really the game that you want to think about. And then the third question that I encourage people to think about is like a question I got from Devon Bandison, which is this. What's a goal or a dream that you secretly gave up on and never told anyone about? One question every day will definitely change your life.
Wow, yeah, that's great to hear about your approach there. So, just to dive a little deeper on that, where do you get your source material for the questions? Like, is there like Tony Robbins' website, or is there something specific that you kind of jump into to say, okay, question of the day for today, or and then it's there? Like, maybe you can just share a little bit about that.
Dude, it's a great question, Ben. No one's asked me that on a podcast. I'm glad you did. I wish there was a great resource on this. The real answer, and people can DM me. If you DM me directly on Instagram or LinkedIn, you just say, "Hey, I listened to Ben's podcast. Can you send me more questions?" I answered the first three. I'll just send them to you. But literally, what I've done in my life is I just take a little bit from everybody and I make my own database. That's why I'm giving credit to Devon because that's not my question. That's his, right? But basically, what my goal is later in life. This is not my focus right now. It's going to be when I'm in my 50s and 60s and I write my memoir. But when I do that later, I'm going to want to focus more on the 80-20 questions. Because I need to focus on communication. That's my legacy that I want to live. But the answer is there's no there's great frameworks like Patrick Bet David has a great list of 25 questions, but what I do is I handpick the best ones from every source that I've found, and I'm nuts, like I listen to 10 hours of podcasts a week, and then I just pick the one that is more significant to me. So on my notepad I literally have hundreds of questions. So I've done this with thousands of questions. That's why I always like to say that I have the clarity of someone who's already passed away. That's what I always say to explain this, right? So that's why I'm able to talk like someone who's 65 years old, but I'm 26, right? It's because I've asked myself so many questions that I just have more clarity than most people. But anyone can do that. It's not because I'm smart or special. It's just because I just took the time to find those questions. That's all.
That's great, seems like pretty, sensible approach. And it's a combination of all the other people's experiences, life knowledge, that's awesome. So I want to talk a little bit more about your YouTube channel. In the last few years, people have been starting all sorts of YouTube channels, and yours has been pretty successful. And congrats on 27,000 subscribers there. So just wondering for the people that are interested, curious, and I'm curious about your success there. Like, what makes it a successful YouTube channel? Is there anything in particular, other secret sauce that you're willing to share?
Yeah, of course, but I'm always open to sharing. So here's what I would say. Most people listening to this podcast probably shouldn't be YouTubers in the same way that most people listening to this shouldn't be a basketball player. Like I shouldn't be a an NBA superstar or whatever. I'd probably break my bones or something. So it's the same thing. So everything is a sport. We just got to pick the right sport that we can win it. So what's the sport for YouTube? What's the formula? The most successful YouTubers on the platform think in decades, not days. It took me, yeah, sure, I got 27 now, and sure, it's growing really, really quickly now. But it took me 2 years and a half to get to 10,000. 2 years and a half, Ben, to get just to 10K. And that's the point I want to drive. It takes a long time to be successful on YouTube. And what I realized is there's one consistent formula that works that won't burn you out as a YouTuber and make you successful. It's just most people won't do it. Which is one quality video a week, one like legendary video, not like some Zoom recording that we're posting on the feed. Like I'm spending 5 figures a year on my YouTube channel. Like this is an investment. This is not like, oh yeah, I'm just kind of doing this randomly. No, it's a 5 figure check that I write my production team every year, and it hurts my bank account every year. But it's for the mission of what I do in Mass Talk, which is to make communication accessible to the world. That's my mission. So for me, what I realized is the rule of 500. If you make, sorry, the rule of 520. If you make one video a week for the next 10 years, that's 520 videos. So if you make 520 quality videos, you'll eventually be super successful on YouTube. It's just most people don't think that far. Right? So obviously now it looks like that I'm super successful. But it took me, what, 7 years to build up the expertise I have today. I started coaching when I was 19, but I started YouTube when I was 22, and it's been 4 years since then. So that's what I would say, is just make YouTube videos, get started. Don't worry about the budget and the 5 figure checks and all that stuff. And just see if you actually like doing it, and then from there reassess and have that long game. Like for me, I'm already writing my content for 2024. We're already done producing 2023. That's how long term you need to be with YouTube, because it's really easy to miss a week and not be consistent. And since I've started the channel, Ben, it's been 3 years and 10 months. I have not missed a week in the history of the channel.
Well, that's amazing consistency, and maybe that's part of the secret right there.
That
So
is the secret.
yeah, no, that's great. Okay, yeah, everybody take notes on that. Listen to Brenden. So yeah, I just wanted to actually touch on your day to day now. You're actually also a public speaking coach, and I just wanted to, ask you, what do you see like when you go out and you do some coaching? Like, what are some common themes that people have challenges with? Being afraid, I guess, is probably number one, and then maybe some other things that people, you know, commonly kind of do, but they don't know it, and that kind of holds them back. I just wonder if you could share maybe your observations over the years.
Absolutely, been happy to. So I call this my easy threes. So these are the three easiest exercises that anyone listening to this podcast, even if you live alone, you could implement every day and easily get results through their communication. Before I jump into those, Ben, let me give a caveat. There's a reason why I explain it this way, because communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. So one of those balls is body language, one of those balls is storytelling, one of them is body language. I actually already said body language, facial expressions, eye contact, and the list goes on. So it can get really confusing if you try and do all 18 at once. That's why I recommend my first three. So let's go with number one, the random word exercise. Pick a random word like phone, like copper, like light bulb, and create random presentations out of thin air. And the reason why I love this exercise is because it forces you to do two things, Ben. To think on your feet, and it forces you to do the following. If you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So that's ball number one. Ball number two is the question drill. We get asked questions all the time in our life, Ben, but most of us are reactive to those questions, whether it's at work, school, on a podcast. I'll give you an example with me. A few years ago, when I was guesting on podcasts, and I sucked back then, somebody asked me the funniest question. He said, "So, Brenden, where does the fear of communication come from?" And I looked at him and I said, I don't know, dude. Los Angeles, San Diego, London, you tell me." Right? So I didn't really know how to answer the question. So instead of being reactive, I became proactive. So every day for 5 minutes, Ben, that's all I ask your audience to do. Just write out one question that you think the world will ask you about your expertise, about your products, about your services. And if you do that once a day for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your industry and you'll be unbeatable. Last one to close, Video messages. Make a list of the 5 people you love the most in your life and just send them quick 20-second video notes just saying, "Hey, Ben, super grateful to have you in my life. Love the podcast that you're doing. Keep up the great work." That's it. Makes people's day.
Yeah, those are great three tips there. So, you know what you mentioned about fear, and I think this is a good topic to touch on because some people, growing up, if you had a really bad experience early in life, public speaking wise, it might really kind of stick with you, for many years. And I'm pretty sure you've worked with some people that have been in that situation. So, yeah, just wondering if you can dive a little deeper on that. So, like, if someone's had a hang up for public speaking and you really want to, help them get to that next level, like, what have you seen as a good technique to use just to, kind of get over that a little bit?
100% Ben. So here's what I'll say. Even as the communication expert, I'm still scared of communication too. Except the level is different. So the level is, let's say me and you are having lunch, and my phone starts to ring, and I pick it up and I realize that it's Elon Musk. And he goes, "Hey man, really like your YouTube videos, like the episode you did with Ben. Can you coach me? I'll pay you $1 million. I'll fly you out of my jet tomorrow. What do you think?" Would I shit my pants? Yeah, yeah, I would. Doesn't matter how good you are at communication. There's always a level that you're going to be scared of, and that's okay. So for me, fear has never been something we try to remove because that's just not possible, but rather a dichotomy we need to manage, a relationship that we need to manage. So here's the analogy. Think of communication like a boxing match, Ben, where one side of the ring is the fear, the anxiety, the stress. "Oh my God, I don't want to do this." Versus the message. Why does this actually matter? Why are we choosing to show up today on this Zoom call? Why are we sharing this out with the world? So the goal, once again, it's not to remove the fear, but rather make sure that when your message and your fear meet in the middle of that boxing match and that bell rings, that your message wins the match, that your message gets the knockout punch. And if you see it that way, you'll always overcome your fear as long as your message is just a little bit more important.
Love the boxing analogy there. So, yeah, fear can be on the other side as an opponent, and maybe we can kind of turn to who's also in your corner. So, when you're having a boxing match, well, you kind of look to people that have inspired you and supported you. And so, this is my next question here. Like, who has been in your corner as an inspiration to you? Maybe family, friends, or other public speakers that you know of? And you can tell us a little bit about who's given you inspiration over the years.
I'm definitely stealing that idea. That is such a great value add to my analogy, Ben, that no one has proposed. And I've guessed on a lot of shows, and no one has proposed it. You're absolutely right. The corner is so brilliant. Why did I think about that? That's actually really good because it does help you enjoy the match and make sure that you come out on top. Completely agree. So I'm really fortunate in my life. I got a lot of those people. My creative director is my best friend, right? He believed in me day one with Master Talk long before I had money or any of this stuff. So that's one. My business partner, of course, right? The guy who really believed in me and wrote me my first check. My family, obviously, my mom and my sister optimize every part of my life so that I can just focus on business and just crush these interviews and crush my coaching calls. So that's another piece. And then it's the heroes, right? Bob, Seth Godin says, Ben, that the difference in a hero and a mentor is a hero is someone you never meet, but you listen to. So I'll give you an example for me. I mean, I got so many of them, and thankfully, I'll probably have opportunities to meet them some point. But people like Seth Godin himself, he's a big mentor, hero of mine. Scott Harrison, the CEO of Charity Water, I think the guy's brilliant. He's raised like hundreds of millions of dollars to help people with clean water. That's another one. And then another piece is Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm a big fan of Gary V's work and what he's been able to do, and he's definitely put a fire up my ass to take this seriously instead of waiting until I was 30 to start Master Talk.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, those are some great names there. So I heard of Gary Vee, and yeah, well, hopefully someone I'll check out down the road here. So yeah, no, that's excellent. So I wanted to ask you, a little bit about, you said you're still working on things, and what is Brenden working on his public speaking abilities right now? Because you seem very polished. People will say, yeah, you can walk in anywhere, no problem. But, I think, the people that are very successful, they always say that they're working on stuff on some aspect to be better all the time. And so, yeah, just curious, what aspect of public speaking are you actually working on right now?
Absolutely, Ben. I mean, I completely agree. I think there's a level for all of us there's a next level for all of us, including me. Right, so for me, I would say the biggest one that I'm working on is my guest appearance on Thursday. So I'm guesting on the biggest podcast in my career on Thursday, and I'm nervous as shit. So I need to make sure that I prepare effectively, and I'm ready now because I did the prep, so I'm gonna crush it. But that's one big thing. Is it's the same strategies, but now it's on bigger stages, bigger opportunities I'm finally getting after a lot of years of hard work to get there. So that's one. The second thing that I'm focused on is really the idea of rapping. You know, I rap a lot every week. I don't really do it professionally. It's just to help with my pacing. So that's where a lot of my routine is. So I don't do the random word exercise anymore. It's too easy for me. So I need to do like rapping. Like pull up an Eminem song and I just start rapping the pacing. It's really hard because you have to match what their pacing is. That's the second thing I do on a consistent basis. And then the third thing is actually coaching my advanced clients. So let's say I got a group of, let's say, give or take 50 to 100 clients, but then there's an advanced program, which is the top 10 people. So these are like my, well, I call them my killers, but I probably shouldn't say that publicly. Like, you know, my the people who are going to dominate the world, the people who are really going to impact millions and millions of people's lives. And it's hard to show up for those 10 people because they're really good. So this is not like, hey, do the random word exercise, remove your filler words. I actually need to show up better. I always need to stay ahead of them or else I never have something to teach them. So actually coaching people who are really, really good at communication is challenging because they look to me as their leader. So I need to actually keep inventing new exercises and drills and they hold me accountable to that in the same way the normal world wouldn't.
Wow. Okay. No, that's interesting to hear. So, do you have like a game plan? You have built material, different source material over the years, and now you have like kind of like a class that you kind of go to. And just wondering, yeah, maybe you can tell us a little bit about like your process, your creative process for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to make sure I'm clear, the creative process behind how I generate ideas or like the course or
Yeah,
just
the course, and maybe maybe I'm your new student, and
oh,
you're
sure.
taking me on, and then how do you kind of create that arc for me, like to learn a little bit, and then kind of grow, and then get better after 1 week, 1 month, and 1 year, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure, Ben. Happy to talk about that. So for people who become clients, it's actually a very small percentage of people because I mostly work with type A people because I'm a pretty intense coach. So think like high level executives, people who want to have massive podcast shows, people have really big dreams in their corporate careers as well or in their businesses. So what happens usually is, I'll always start with this. Come to my free training. I do a free workshop every 2 weeks that I know we're going to talk about later. You can go to rockstarcommunicator.com and just sign up for that. These are free workshops. It's not like recorded, it's live, it's interactive. But the reason we do these free workshops is one, to give back to the community, right? I want people to have access to that workshop. For as long as I can facilitate it for free, I'll do it. But then the other piece is it's also a vetting tool that we use for clients because it shows us who's really committed. And then for those people, which is probably 1%, let's say out of every 100% people who listen to me, one of them will become a client, or every 200 person, one of them will be a client. So for those people, we walk them through kind of like the Navy SEALs boot camp of communication, which is the random word exercise. Well, I get clients to do that 100 times in 2 weeks or I fire them, right? That kind of intensity. Question drills. Forget like once a day. That's like child's play. I'll do that. I'll say that on a podcast because I want people to implement in a way that they don't feel threatened. But with my clients, it's very different, right? I'm drilling them on 100 questions in like 3 hours, right? So that they're perfect because they're like CEOs of companies. So they need to be perfect or else it's going to cost them a lot of money. So think of all of the exercises that we talked about today, but on steroids with intense accountability. That's like an easy way to explain it.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Brenda.
Of
So,
course.
as we wind down this podcast, I always like to ask, all our guests, it's a two-parter question here. So, what are you most grateful for, and what are you looking most forward to in the future?
So much to be grateful for, man. Great question. I would say for me the biggest thing I'm grateful for is freedom. I have a gift that people who are more successful than me, people have more money than me, more cars than me, more houses than me, just can't buy, which is peace of mind. I get to do what I love. Like every single meeting, I'm looking at my calendar right now. Every single meeting I have today, I look forward to it. It's either an interview or it's a coaching call. It's just something I want to do, or a sales call or something. But it's not like I'm doing a technology implementation anymore and I'm like, oh my God, I have to interact with these five people I don't want to talk to anymore. So that's the biggest. I'm just grateful for freedom. I bought my freedom at 25, which is very rare to do in one's life, and I don't take that for granted at all. I'm not the richest guy in the world, but I got freedom. And the thing that I look forward to is seeing my vision come to life. I think that's the big thing. Now that I'm starting to see it, it's exciting. Now the wheel is actually turning without me having to push it too hard. And now it's about, spinning that wheel as quickly as possible so I can reach the person that I'm meant to become in this world.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Brenden. That's really amazing and inspirational too. So if you can do it, anybody can. I think that's kind of the message here. So
That's literally the message. And let me double tap on that. A lot of people, in life, you can choose to tell stories around why you should take action or why you shouldn't. I have every excuse in the book not to do it, Ben. I'm too young, broken arm, it's multiple languages. The guy barely knows how to speak English. He's got an accounting degree. Well, he's got no money. He shouldn't do any of this. Or the story could be, what about the 16-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach? What are we doing for her? Because she's not going to relate to the 60-year-old man on YouTube who barely knows how to talk English because he's too old to communicate ideas. I don't want to be offensive, but that's kind of how I look at it. Right? So that's the game, right? So what are we doing for that girl? And the answer is, I'm the only communication coach in my early 20s. I mean, not early 20s anymore, but at the time, that could actually relate to that person. So it's either I make the videos or nobody does. So it's all about find an excuse to do the thing, not rather than not to do the thing, and I think you'll be able to move forward. And that's what I tell my exec clients all the time. And I tell them in their face, hey, look, guys, I'm the youngest guy in this room. And I'm posting on social by a long stretch. My average client age is like 20 years older than me. I have a lot less wisdom than everyone on this call. I have all these bad things, yet I took action. So what's your excuse? And that really gets them to take action.
yeah, that's great. That's totally great. So Brenden, it's been terrific having you on. And if people want to see a little bit more about you, hear about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, for sure, Ben. Thanks for having me on. This is great. 2 ways to keep in touch. One is the YouTube channel. Just go to Master Talk. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And 2 is my live workshop that we talked about a few minutes ago. It's every 2 weeks. It's free. It's live. It's interactive. And I facilitate the call myself. So if you want to jump in on that, just go to rockstarcommunicator.com. And if you're introverted or shy, feel free to jump in as well. You can totally turn off your camera and just listen in. It's totally fine.
Thanks for sharing, Brenden. We'll add those to our show notes. So that's a wrap for episode 3, everyone. Thanks for listening, and namaste, everyone.